So in our last video, we showed you how to set up payroll. But now, as we all know, no matter how much we plan, things are going to go wrong. So let's talk about a complicated payroll and how you would deal with that. So in this scenario, we have a concert, we have our cellist Kai, and we have a concert of 8 services. So let's say Kai was hired as a sub. We brought him as a sub. So he's playing sub rate at $50. That's 8 services. That's going to be $400. But we found out that Kai's a really good player. The conductor really likes his playing. And as it happened, one of the section players got sick one of the nights. Oh, so we've got to pay him 7 services at sub rate and 1 service at a section rate. This is where it gets complicated. No problem. If you notice at the left-hand side, you'll see all these plus signs. What that does is it adds another type of whatever it's next to. So in this case, it was next to rate, so we add another rate. So now we select section. That was one of the services. We need to change this to 7. And so now you notice that he's getting paid 1 service at section rate, $100, 7 services at a sub rate. Oh, but the conductor really liked him, so he went on ahead and let him play 7 services, or sorry, 3 services at section rate and 5 at the sub rate. Oh, but it got even worse. As it turned out, the principal got sick one of the nights of the concert. Conductor really loved Kai and felt he was the only person to move up to principal. So now we got this scenario with 4 services at sub rate, 3 services at section rate, 1 service at principal rate. So we simply add another rate. We change this to principal, change it to a 1, change it to a 4, and now we've got our calculation as 650. Oh, but it gets worse. Let's say that Kai is very friendly with everybody and offers to bring a harp for the harpist. So he gets paid cardage for one of those services. And he's also really good friends with the timpanist. So we got to pay him a harp cardage and a timpani cardage. All right, no problem. We simply add another cardage, changes to timpani, and let's say he ended up bringing it twice. So notice our calculations over here. Now we get into mileage. Let's say we're paying him a standard mileage at 100, and he only drove that once. But when he got principal, it states in our master agreement that principals get paid a special mileage rate. Oh, so one of the rates had to be paid at standard, but one of the rates had to be paid at a special rate. We simply add a special rate, change it to our special rate, and let's say it so happens he had to drive 300 miles on that night, one of the nights. So now we got that figured out. So now we got to get into, let's say, doubling, just for sake of argument. Let's say it just so happens that Kai happens to be a percussionist. And one of the nights, he went back and played triangle, so we had to pay him percussion doubling. Okay, so we're going to do that. And if you recall the way we set up doubling, doubling was set up as a percentage when we set up percussion doubling. And it's a percentage off of the rate. So if you notice over here, we have our rate. And so we have our 200 plus 300, that's going to be our 500 plus 150, that's going to be 650. That's where that number is coming from. So it's finding all the rates, it's putting that in that box, and we set up as 10% of the rate. There's our zero point 0.1 times the rate, there's our 65, and there's that. Now, one thing to be careful about the percentages, when you're setting up percentages, you're telling the system is taking a sum total off of whatever you told it to. In this case, it's rate. So it's going to take it off of this box. So this is going to simply be a 1 every time. So you want to be careful about that whenever you're setting up rates. Um, and if there's a scenario where you have to finagle that number, I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. Okay, so now we get to dues. Okay, it just so happens Kai's in the union, so we have to take union dues. All right, if you remember the way we set up union dues, it's going to be a calculation, I believe, off of rate, cartage, and I think doubling. So it's going to take all of these numbers, and it's going to figure that out. So we set up union, and that 820, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's going to be our rate and our cartage, I think, and I'll think a little bit of doubling. Could be wrong about that, but that's where that number is coming from. And also remember, dues is a deduction, so it's subtracting 164 from this from the total rate, and that's or the sum total of all of this, and that's where we're getting this number. So You can see how this can just go insane with this, right? You can just keep adding all these different scenarios. But now let's say you come up with a scenario, you've got all this done, and let's take a scenario where, he said, "Hey, man, look, I did this favor for you. I set in for a principal. I know I'm getting principal rate, but this is last minute. Can you give me a little extra money?" And so you're thinking like, "Oh, sure. Let's add a little bit to that. I won't tell anybody." No problem. You notice all these boxes over here. You can actually change these. So the numbers initially is going to be taking from whatever your default was, whatever your preset was when you set up your types. So in this case, it was 150. But let's say you make a deal with them. You say, "Sure, man, I'll pay you 160. How about that?" So you notice it recalculate everything over here. Now this number, instead of being 150, it's going to be 160. So I'm going to save this and keep an eye on this. Actually, let's go ahead and say we decided to give them a little extra money for the Timpani cartage. And let's say, yeah, let's go with that. So we'll save it. So keep a number on your eye on 65 and that principal rate right there, and that rate, that total. Save this, and you notice it kept everything. So there's our principal rate that had been changed. It normally is 150, but we changed it to 160, and then we had changed our timpani rate to 65, and our total is there. And if you want to change it back, you simply retoggle it back to principal, and you'll notice it changed it back to 150. Of course, we would resave it. So you can see the possibilities of this, and no matter how complicated your payroll gets, you have an option on how to fix that. I hope this video has been helpful, and good luck to you.